The Iron Man of Cambodia, Hun Sen's Rise and Rule, read and published by Mr. Books. For over 3 decades, one name has cast a formidable shadow across the political landscape of Cambodia: Hun Sen. As Prime Minister since 1985, Hun Sen's journey from a rural village boy to the country's undisputed leader is not merely the story of a man but of a nation forged in fire, survival, and iron-willed ambition. The Iron Man of Cambodia, Hun Sen's Rise and Rule, delves into the complex, controversial, and captivating biography of a leader whose tenure has left an indelible mark on Southeast Asia. Born into a humble peasant family during Cambodia's era of simmering unrest, Hun Sen's rise seemed improbable, if not impossible. The nation he would come to lead was torn apart by civil war, foreign occupation, and one of the 20th century's most brutal genocides. His trajectory from Khmer Rouge cadre to defector, and from military strongman to the architect of modern Cambodia, traces the blood-soaked contours of a country struggling to find peace, identity, and prosperity amidst relentless adversity. This book seeks to illuminate the intricate machinery that has kept Hun Sen at Cambodia's helm. An amalgam of political cunning, military prowess, alliances and betrayals, and an evolving grasp of both soft and hard power. We explore his calculated climb through the Cambodia People's Party, CPP, the Machiavellian elimination of rivals, and the seasonal reconfiguration of policies in response to internal and external threats. Through a blend of oral histories, archival research, analysis of statcraft, and first-hand accounts, we provide a nuanced portrait of a man lauded as a stabilizer and reviled as an autocrat. Equally important is the examination of social and economic transformations overseen by Hun Sen's government. The streets of Phnom Penh, burgeoning with foreign investment and private wealth, reflect both the progress and the persistent inequalities of Cambodian society. Beneath development's veneer lurk unresolved tensions, brutal crackdowns on dissent, land dispossession, and a judiciary seen as an instrument of power rather than justice. At a time when global attention is again turning toward Southeast Asia's shifting alliances and internal challenges, understanding Hun Sen's saga is essential for grasping Cambodia's present and future. His family's increasing grip on politics signals a possible dynastic succession, raising questions about the durability of his legacy and the shape of democracy in Cambodia for years to come. In Steel Rain, we journey beyond headlines and polemics, seeking to understand not only the making of Hun Sen, but also the forging of modern Cambodia under his indomitable rule as enduring and implacable as steel itself. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy. Chapter 1: Legacy of Hardship. Early life amidst turmoil. Hun Sen's early years unfolded against the backdrop of a Cambodia in perennial crisis, its landscapes marked by jade-green rice paddies, unending cycles of monsoonal flooding, and the ever-present specter of conflict. Born Hun Bunal on August 5, 1952, in Peen Kyo Sna, Kampong Kam Province, his childhood offered scant comfort or safety. Like millions of his compatriots, he grew up traumatized by the grinding poverty that gripped rural Cambodia. Stories from these formative years would later fuel Hun Sen's cultivated image as the embodiment of the Cambodian everyman, one who intimately understood the pain, hunger, and fears of his people. The roots of Hun Sen's ambition can be traced to both his family lineage and Cambodia's fractured political history. The Kingdom of Cambodia, rich in culture and history, was by the mid-20th century a pawn in Cold War gamesmanship and regional military conflict. Colonial influences lingered, while nascent nationalism struggled for supremacy. For the Bunal family, survival meant adapting to conditions that shifted with each season and political upheaval. Hun Sen's parents were subsistence farmers ambitious for their son, but constrained by circumstance. In this humble setting, young Hun Gunal learned two invaluable lessons: that unpredictability was the only constant, and that power was never freely given or easily got as a schoolboy. Hun Sen proved diligent, quiet, and observant, yet worldly innocence was short-lived. The nascent stirrings of civil unrest, exacerbated by the Vietnam War's spillover effects, soon enveloped the countryside. Piem Ko Sna's proximity to major supply routes made it a target of both government and insurgent intrusion. By adolescence, Hun Sen, like many Cambodian youth, saw violence as commonplace. Gunfire and shifting allegiances replaced the stability of traditions. The safety of childhood soon yielded to the pragmatism of survival. This crucible of hardship would become a defining feature of Hun Sen's leadership style. Tough, unsentimental, but adaptive. In 1970, Cambodia underwent dramatic political upheaval. The monarchy was ousted in a coup led by General Lon Nol, spurred by pressures from both within and beyond the nation's borders. The Republican government, however, proved unable to ensure lasting peace. Instead, the countryside, already battered by American bombings, became a battleground upon which new dangers emerged. For Hun Sen, the landscape of shifting power was an education in realpolitik, more vivid and urgent than any classroom lesson could provide. Drawn to revolutionary ideals and seeking an escape from rural deprivation, Hun Sen joined the Khmer Rouge at just 19. Entering clandestine networks of youthful cadres, he became consumed by the instant camaraderie and stark certainty the movement offered, a belief in change, no matter the cost. Soon inducted into the ranks under the nom de guerre Hun Sen, he began a transformation from rural youth to nascent revolutionary. Yet, even within the Khmer Rouge's dark embrace, Hun Sen's intuition for survival and flexibility became clear. While others clung rigidly to doctrine, he absorbed the value of alliances, quick adaptation, and knowing when to retreat as well as when to advance. These qualities would soon distinguish him within a movement soon to become both Cambodia's salvation and its greatest tragedy. Hun Sen's introduction to politics was, thus, one of exigency rather than choice, a testament to the profound ways in which history and personal circumstance can intertwine. His experience of early deprivation, violence, and ideological fervor prepared him for a life where trust was in short supply and loyalty often fatal. In the smoldering ruins of his childhood, a leader both iron-willed and enigmatic was forged. Chapter 2. Forged in War. Hun Sen's Path Through Conflict. As Cambodia's descent into chaos deepened in the early 1970s, Hun Sen found himself at the heart of one of the 20th century's most notorious and devastating regimes. The Khmer Rouge, having capitalized on rural discontent and widespread hunger for change, seized Phnom Penh in April 1975, inaugurating Year Zero and a radical plan to transform Cambodian society. Young Hun Sen, now a mid-level commander within the Khmer Rouge, witnessed firsthand the brutality and ideological extremism that characterized Pol Pot's reign. The vision was simple but uncompromising. Eradicate all traces of the old society, annihilate class distinctions, and build an agrarian utopia through the forced labor of millions. In practice, the Khmer Rouge engineered the systematic destruction of Cambodia's social fabric, executing intellectuals, religious leaders, and anyone deemed an enemy of the revolution. Starvation, disease, and mass executions claimed an estimated 2 million lives. Within this theater of violence and suspicion, Hun Sen's ability to adapt and survive became the bedrock of his future leadership. Close colleagues would later recall his strategic reserve and caution, his preference for calculated decisions over doctrinaire fervor. While to outward appearances a loyal revolutionary, Hun Sen harbored growing doubts about the regime's path and increasingly about his safety. The climate within the upper echelons was one of perpetual purges. Loyalty could save you one day and cost you your life the next. By 1977, as internecine purges threatened even trusted cadres, Hun Sen made a fateful calculation that would alter both his destiny and that of his nation. Along with several fellow officers, he defected to Vietnam, a dangerous and nearly fatal move, as the border area was perilous, patrolled by both Khmer Rouge and Vietnamese soldiers. The decision was driven by a mixture of self-preservation and budding dissent as much as any grand political vision. Nonetheless, his arrival in Vietnam set the stage for his evolution from embattled cadre to state builder. In exile, Hun Sen quickly proved his adaptability. The Vietnamese, eager to cultivate Cambodians loyal to their vision of a post-Khmer Rouge order, recognized his organizational acumen and pragmatic outlook. Appointed to leadership roles within the nascent Kampuchean United Front for National Salvation, CUFINS, he was soon tasked with mobilizing support among Cambodian refugees and building connections with other dissidents. Vietnam's 1978 invasion marked a watershed moment. In a lightning assault, Vietnamese forces toppled the Khmer Rouge, occupying Phnom Penh and installing a new government composed largely of exiled cadres, Hun Sen among them. The newly minted People's Republic of Kampuchea faced immense challenges: widespread famine, devastated infrastructure, and lingering insurgency from Pol Pot's loyalists, now regrouped along Cambodia's remote frontiers. Navigating the early years of this fragile regime, Hun Sen displayed a knack for balancing competing pressures. As foreign minister and later prime minister, he managed relations not only with Vietnam, but also with wary communities of surviving Cambodians. His advocacy for gradual normalization and dialogue, tempered by a willingness to deploy harsh measures when necessary, began to consolidate his influence within the ruling Cambodian People's Party, CPP, as Cambodia limped toward a semblance of recovery in the 1980s. Hun Sen's path was emblematic of a leadership shaped not by ideology alone, but by the relentless need to survive and adapt. The war years did not end with Vietnam's withdrawal in 1989. The wounds ran too deep, and the legacy of violence would cast a long and complicated shadow. Yet, in the smoldering aftermath of revolution, Hun Sen emerged as the iron sinew holding together a nation desperate for new beginnings. However fraught and uncertain. In retrospect, the crucible of war not only forged Hun Sen's reputation, but also instilled an enduring model of governance: pragmatic, sometimes ruthless, often opportunistic. His experiences in the trenches and the halls of power would define his approach to both allies and adversaries in the turbulent decades to follow. Chapter 3: From Commander to Power Broker, the CPP and Political Machinations. Hun Sen's transition from revolutionary commander to political architect was neither smooth nor assured. The 1980s and early 1990s represented a time of profound uncertainty for both Cambodia and the man set to rule it. Vietnam's occupation, while ending the horrors of the Khmer Rouge, left Cambodia internationally isolated, with many governments refusing to recognize the Vietnamese-backed People's Republic of Kampuchea, PRK. The international community, led by the United States and China, continued to support anti-PRK factions, including remnants of the Khmer Rouge and Royalists united under the banner of the coalition Government of Democratic Kampuchea. Within this labyrinthine political landscape, Hun Sen's ascent was marked by several defining attributes: tactical flexibility, unyielding ambition, and a talent for maneuvering between power centers within his own party, the CPP, as well as external actors. He swiftly identified latent rifts within the CPP between original communists and those more amenable to reform, and exploited these splits to strengthen his base. His background as a Khmer Rouge defector gave him credibility among hardliners, while his willingness to forge pragmatic alliances endeared him to the Vietnamese and more moderate CPP factions. The late 1980s brought new challenges. International pressure mounted for a political settlement to the Cambodian conflict, culminating in negotiations for a United Nations brokered peace plan. For Hun Sen, the opening to the Paris Peace Accords presented both a threat and an opportunity. While the accords mandated multi-party elections and opened the political system to rivals, Hun Sen saw the transitional process as a chance to consolidate power using both old and new tools. The United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia, UNTAC, arrived in 1992 to oversee elections and reconstruction. Despite international optimism, the practical realities remained daunting. Armed factions continued to wage war, and the infrastructure of democracy was, at best, embryonic. The 1993 elections marked a pivotal moment. Though the royalist Hun Sen party won a majority of seats, Hun Sen and the CPP refused to cede control. In a deft political gambit, Hun Sen negotiated a co-prime ministership with Norodom, ran a fragile arrangement that masked underlying tensions. The years that followed saw Hun Sen gradually sidelining his rivals. Through a combination of legal machinations, co-option, and carefully calibrated violence, he outmaneuvered Ranarid, culminating in the bloody 1997 coup that made Hun Sen Cambodia's sole prime minister. While condemnation from Western nations followed, Hun Sen weathered the storm, quickly restoring relative stability and securing the recognition of key regional players. The 1998 elections, marred by allegations of intimidation and irregularities, nonetheless solidified Hun Sen's dominance. Throughout this era, Hun Sen honed a style characterized by a blend of carrot and stick, offering positions to potential defectors, rewarding loyalty lavishly, and demonstrating both a willingness to compromise and an iron resolve when threatened. The CPP, once riven by ideological schisms, was transformed into a tightly disciplined electoral machine, its apparatus reaching into every village and ministry across Cambodia. This chapter in Hun Sen's rule cemented his status as Cambodia's master political strategist, a leader equally skilled in negotiation, subterfuge, and coercion. His commitment to maintaining power above all else shaped the political order for decades to follow, laying the groundwork for an era of relative peace buoyed by the heavy hand of centralized control. Chapter 4: Consolidation of Control, Strategies of Survival and Governance. Hun Sen's path to uncontested leadership after 1997 marked the dawn of a new era for Cambodia. The memory of war and revolution still haunted the nation, but Hun Sen's strategies for consolidating control revealed a leader intent not merely on survival but on permanent political dominance. The Cambodia People's Party, CPP, once internally divided, now operated with iron unity, its key figures bound by patronage networks that reached into every strata of Cambodian society. At the village level, CPP loyalists distributed microloans, land titles, and jobs. At the ministerial level, loyalty to Hun Sen brought promotions and lucrative business opportunities. The seamless fusion of state and party transcended mere political maneuvering. It rewove the fabric of Cambodian administration around Hun Sen's persona and authority. Central to Hun Sen's consolidation was his mastery of selective violence and the prudent distribution of rewards. While he demonstrated a willingness to tolerate a degree of dissent, usually as a safety valve, Any serious threat was met with swift, often brutal retribution. Opposition leaders faced arrest or exile, while independent media outlets were forced to shut down, absorbed, or cowed into cooperation. The judiciary, increasingly filled with party loyalists, became a primary instrument for neutralizing challengers. With the opposition marginalized, Hun Sen turned to the project of nation-building. Modernizing infrastructure, attracting foreign investment, and overseeing economic growth became both the means and the justification for extended rule. Under his tenure, cities like Phnom Penh were transformed from sleepy colonial outposts into bustling urban centers, their skylines dominated by new construction. Highways, schools, and hospitals began to dot the landscape, tangible proof of progress that won popular support, or at least acquiescence. Yet beneath the surface of development, the costs of this governance style mounted. Land seizures to make way for foreign investment or development often left rural Cambodians homeless and disenfranchised. Corruption, the inevitable byproduct of consolidated power, surged. Cambodia regularly ranked among the world's most corrupt countries. For many, particularly in the countryside, economic gains were fleeting, and inequality grew stark. Hun Sen's foreign policy further cemented his position. While once reliant solely on Vietnamese support, he courted a range of global partners, including China, whose immense investment and few political strings provided vital support. Cambodia's international alliances became a crucial buffer, allowing Hun Sen to resist Western pressure on human rights and democracy with relative impunity. His regime's longevity has been attributed not just to repression, but to a careful balancing of progress and threat. Hun Sen presented himself as the indispensable guardian of stability, warning that without his guiding hand, Cambodia could relapse into chaos. This melding of fear and hope rendered serious opposition nearly impossible. Over time, what began as provisional measures of survival evolved into the architecture of an enduring, and in many ways, ironclad political order. In sum, Hun Sen's mastery lay not simply in quashing his enemies, but in wielding the levers of development, patronage, and selective legitimacy to create a system where his rule appeared not only inevitable, but natural. This ironclad reign left Cambodia fundamentally changed economically, socially, and politically, offering a paradigm of post-conflict governance that would captivate and confound observers for years to come. Chapter 5. Economic Overhauls. Growth Amidst Controversy. The economic story of Cambodia in the Hun Sen era is a tale of remarkable transformation intertwined with pervasive controversy. Rising from the ashes of genocide and civil war, Cambodia's economy once languished in the 1980s, scarred by stagnant productivity and international sanctions. Yet, under Hun Sen's stewardship, the country witnessed one of Southeast Asia's most dramatic economic expansions, albeit draped in complexity and contradiction. When Hun Sen assumed near absolute power in the late 1980s, Cambodia's infrastructure was in ruins. Roads were destroyed, factories shuttered, and millions were displaced or dead. The first steps toward recovery were painstaking. Guided by Vietnamese advisors and later by an influx of international agencies, Hun Sen's government embarked on efforts to stabilize rice production and restore basic trade. However, it was only after the United Nations brokered peace in the early 1990s that Cambodia's economic prospects began to truly shift. The 1993 Paris Peace Accords unlocked aid and foreign investment on an unprecedented scale. Hun Sen, though initially sharing power in an uneasy coalition, grasped the opportunity to position Cambodia as a market-friendly, open-for-business country. Garment manufacturing quickly became the backbone of the new economy, spurred by US and EU trade preferences. Factories mushroomed on Phnom Penh's outskirts, employing hundreds of thousands, and For the first time in decades, offering upward mobility to a new generation. Tourism soon followed, as the haunting beauty of Angkor Wat drew travelers to scene. Reap, hotels and restaurants flourished, and the sector injected vital foreign currency. Landed development accelerated, transforming Phnom Penh, Sihanoukville, and other urban centers. High-rises rose along the Tonle Sap, and luxury casinos attracted investors from the region and beyond. Yet Cambodia's rapid economic growth has always been shadowed by controversy. While GDP grew at impressive annual rates averaging around 7% for several consecutive years, this prosperity was neither evenly distributed nor free from scandal. Corruption wormed its way through every rung of government and commerce. It was estimated that millions of dollars were skimmed from foreign aid, and that lucrative land deals favored elite interests closely tied to the ruling Cambodian People's Party, CPP. Land grabbing became endemic. Rural communities were evicted from ancestral homes to clear the way for agribusiness plantations, Chinese-funded industrial parks, and luxury developments. Dissent was crushed. Villagers who protested were often met with force. Anger simmered its expression, held in check by a state apparatus increasingly adept at intimidation and control. Environmental costs, too, mounted. Cambodia's precious forests dwindled as logging concessions were awarded to connected tycoons. Once teeming fisheries on the Tonle Sap saw catches plummet as dams upstream and local pollution took their toll. Urban sprawl devoured wetlands and heritage architecture alike, prompting outcry from both preservationists and local communities. Despite the evident shortcomings, Hun Sen's defenders point to the visible gains. Millions lifted out of dire poverty, life expectancy nearly doubling since the 1980s, and an emerging urban middle class. International backers, most notably, China, offered credit lines and infrastructure projects that further rewrote Cambodia's economic landscape. Mega projects, from highways to hydropower dams, promised jobs and connectivity, though debt dependency and environmental concerns persisted. One of the most significant chapters in Hun Sen's economic policy was Cambodia's accession to the HEAS World Trade Organization, WTO, in 2004. This event signaled a commitment to global trade norms, spurring regulatory reforms and attracting new foreign investors. However, it also exposed local industries to fierce competition and failed, in many ways, to spark broad-based industrial diversification. The labor sector became an arena for both empowerment and unrest. Garment workers, predominantly young women, organized for fair wages and better conditions, resulting in periodic strikes and deadly crackdowns. The government, caught between the need to uphold a business-friendly reputation and quell unrest, often resorted to heavy-handed tactics. Throughout, Hun Sen's economic narrative remained carefully managed. State-aligned media celebrated anew malls, hotels, and luxury cars as emblematic of progress, while international reports detailed land dispossessions, disenfranchisement, and the mounting cost of inequality. Critics argued that growth at any cost had deepened corruption and made the country ever more beholden to authoritarian investors. As Cambodia pressed into the 2020s, the challenges of sustaining growth became clearer. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in the garment sector and tourism, while escalating debt to China cast a long shadow. Calls for economic diversification, environmental protection, and genuine anti-corruption measures grew louder, even as the state tightened its grip on civil society and free expression. In the iron grip of Hun Sen, Cambodia's economic transformation has been as much about optics as it has about substance. Shimmering new skylines and glossy infrastructure photos mask continuing vulnerabilities, rural poverty, fragile institutions, and deep-rooted patronage networks that stymie transparent development. Whether this Cambodian miracle proves enduring or simply a gilded surface remains a question for history. Chapter 6: Shadow and Doubt, Human Rights, Opposition, and International Relations in the Shadow of Towering Skyscrapers and Tourist Landmarks. The reality of human rights and political freedoms in Hun Sen's Cambodia remains fraught with peril and ambiguity. The official narrative extols peace and progress. The lived experience for activists, journalists, and opposition figures is punctuated by surveillance, repression, and recurring waves of international critique. Hun Sen's rise from battlefield commander to national leader was, from the outset, inseparable from the language of survival. The early days of his rule amid Khmer Rouge remnants, Vietnamese occupation, and international sanctions were marred by paranoia, purges, and brutal crackdowns on any perceived subversion. Over time, as Cambodia opened to the world, the methods of repression became more sophisticated, but no less effective. A recurring flashpoint is the fate of political opposition. Cambodia's brief experiment with multi-party competition in the 1990s, orchestrated by United Nations peacekeepers, quickly eroded under the weight of violence and intimidation. Recurrent power-sharing deals with royalists devolved into inertia, or outright sabotage. By the 2000s, Hun Sen's Cambodian People's Party had mastered the mechanics of electoral dominance, marginalizing rivals through control of campaign funding, media airwaves, and electoral commissions. The 2013 and 2017 election cycles marked turning points. Surging popular support for the Cambodia National Rescue Party, CNRP, led by Sam Rainsy and Kem Sokha, posed unprecedented challenges. In response, the government ratcheted up harassment arrests on dubious charges, sudden exile, and the outright dissolution of the CNRP before the 2018 general election. The result was an all but uncontested victory for the CPP, sealing Hun Sen's status as the region's most enduring autocrat. Freedom of the press, once cautiously encouraged by donor agencies, fell victim to relentless pressure. Independent newspapers were forced to shutter or sell to pro-government owners. Outspoken journalists faced trumped-up criminal charges. The digital sphere, a potential lifeboat for free speech, was heavily surveilled, with social media users sometimes paying a steep price for critical posts. Non-governmental organizations, so instrumental in Cambodia's post-war recovery, were hemmed in by restrictive laws, their offices raided, and staff detained without warning. Human rights defenders point to a litany of abuses: arbitrary detention, suppression of protests, torture in custody, and the systematic neutralization of dissent. Rural and indigenous communities, often the first to feel the impact of land and resource grabs, found themselves targeted for even modest resistance. Labor organizers and environmental activists were harassed, detained, or worse, their causes branded as threats to public order and national unity. Yet international relations have complicated the calculus. While Western governments condemned human rights violations, sometimes imposing aid cuts or visa bans, Hun Sen responded by deepening ties with China, whose support came with no such political strings. Beijing became the major funder of infrastructure, real estate, and hydropower projects, effectively insulating Cambodia from Western censure. At the same time, Hun Sen played a careful balancing act. Southeast Asian neighbors, fellow members of ASEAN, were generally loath to interfere, prizing stability and non-interference over democratic advocacy. Within this environment, Cambodia took turns as both diplomatic maverick blocking ASEAN consensus on issues like the South China Sea, and as a strategic pawn in broader geopolitical games. The shadow of violence never entirely faded. From the infamous 1997 coup, which swept away the last vestiges of true power sharing, to to the targeted killings of activists and the orchestrated clampdown on demonstrations. The pattern persisted. Cambodia's stability was enforced, not freely chosen. Prominent critics, including labor leaders like Chi Vishia and environmentalist Chut Wutty, lost their lives in attacks that remained unresolved or suspiciously investigated. Despite, or perhaps because of, this pervasive repression, grassroots activism has stubbornly endured. Youth movements harnessed social media. Citizen journalists chronicled land disputes and protests, and international watchdogs shone a stark light on abuses. Yet the risks are ever present, and many activists operate under the constant threat of arrest or assault. Hun Sen's frequent refrain is that only his style of firm, centralized control can protect Cambodia from the chaos of the past. His critics, however, see this as a pretext for indefinite one-man rule, a system that delivers order at the expense of accountability and justice. As Cambodia tilts further toward China and away from the norms extolled by international donors, its human rights landscape becomes both a measure and a casualty of enduring autocracy. The Iron Rain has delivered peace, but peace laced with suspicion and uncertainty, a society where development soars, but freedom walks a tightrope shadowed by doubt. Chapter 7. Dynasty in the Making: Family, Succession, and the Politics of Legacy. In contemporary Cambodia, where ancient dynasties once traced their lineage through the bas-reliefs of Angkor Wat, a modern political dynasty has quietly but decisively taken shape. Anyone tracing the arc of Hun Sen's rule cannot ignore the intentional cultivation of a family legacy project as calculated and formidable as any phase of his long governance. For decades, questions of succession in Cambodia were tinged with uncertainty. The horrors of the Pol Pot era and the chaos that followed erased the traditional lines of political legitimacy. When Hun Sen seized the prime minister's seat, his rule was fragile, underpinned by military loyalty and shifting alliances. By the early 2000s, as stability set in, the idea of continuity by blood, not just party, emerged as a guiding principle. Hun Sen's family, once anonymous, became public fixtures. His wife Bun Rainey rose to lead the influential Cambodian Red Cross, wielding both humanitarian and political influence. His eldest son, Hun Mana, trained at West Point and educated abroad, was groomed for a leadership role from an early age. Other relatives' sons, daughters, in-laws secured senior posts across government, security forces, banking, and business. By the late 2010s, the outlines of a dynastic succession became clear. As aging politburos across Southeast Asia pondered the handover of power, Hun Sen's actions were both cautionary and predictive. He incrementally promoted Hun Mane to the highest echelons of the armed forces, ensuring loyalty and public recognition. While other children occupied roles in administration, diplomacy, and business, it was Hun Mane who emerged as the clear political heir. The strategy was multi-pronged. Party cadres in the Cambodian People's Party were marshaled to accept the inevitability of dynastic succession, sometimes couched in a language of unity, continuity, and patriotism. Dissenting voices within the party, should they emerge, marginalized or compelled to toe the line. Public ceremonies and state media broadcasts showcased the family at major events, suggesting a seamless transfer rather than a break or upheaval. Observers noted the effectiveness of this approach. The persistent drumbeat of Hun in public life signaled both stability for some and creeping authoritarianism for others. Those who dared to criticize were swiftly reminded that loyalty to the dynasty was synonymous with loyalty to the nation. Cambodia's nascent dynastic model was both modern and deeply traditional. It mirrored regional patterns, drawing parallels with North Korea's Kim family, Singapore's Lee family, and neighboring Laos and Vietnam's party succession norms. while invoking historical continuities with Cambodia's monarchies. Yet unlike older royal legacies, this one wielded secular, military, and economic power, all consolidated under the personal command of Hun Sen. The prospect of a dynasty inevitably fueled debate. Supporters argued that only the Hun family's continued leadership could safeguard the gains of peace and development, especially in a society haunted by violent upheaval. Skeptics, meanwhile, warned that the dynasty stifled merit, marginalized alternative leaders, and entrenched the culture of patronage over modern governance. The question of succession also played neatly into international dynamics. Western donors fretted about family autocracy, while China's leadership, deeply invested in continuity and stability, welcomed a familiar ruling style. Behind the scenes, Hun Sen maintained ambiguity over the timeline of succession, sometimes threatening to step down, sometimes asserting his intent to rule until I am 90. This shifting rhetoric kept rivals off balance and forestalled premature jockeying within the party. The looming threat of unrest or challenge to the family line was countered by omnipresent security, surveillance, and well-calibrated propaganda. By the 2020s, the machinery of the dynasty was in full motion. Hun Sen's rise through the military and visible engagement in state affairs signaled an orderly handover in the offing. Meanwhile, other family members continued to fortify the economic and political bulwarks, creating a network that spanned every facet of Cambodian life. For the Cambodian people, the politics of legacy are a double-edged sword. On one side lies the promise of continuity, an assurance that chaos will not return. On the other hand, there is the reality that real pluralism, meritocracy, and accountability may be forever out of reach. The legacy of the Iron Man, it seems, will long endure not only in policies and infrastructure, but most profoundly in the bloodline that now traces the contours of Cambodia's future. Chapter 8. The Iron Legacy. Cambodia's future, beyond Hun Sen, as the sun rises over the Mekong, painting the skyline of Phnom Penh in gold. The question of Cambodia's future looms larger than ever. What will remain when Hun Sen's unparalleled in its longevity and dominance finally passes into history? The Iron Legacy is not just a question of concrete infrastructure or economic indices. It encompasses the very fabric of national identity, governance, and the contested meaning of progress. The durability of Hun Sen's rule is undeniable. Optimists credit him with rescuing Cambodia from the abyss, ushering in peace, and elevating living standards for millions. Detractors see a society suffocated by fear, where one man's endurance became a barrier to genuine democracy and social renewal. As Cambodia stands at the crossroads of a generational shift, both camps grapple with the concrete realities and intangible dilemmas that this legacy bequeaths. One of the regime's most indelible marks is the transformation of state institutions. Under Hun Sen, the army, police, courts, and bureaucracy were systematically woven into networks of personal loyalty and patronage. While this brought an uneasy stability, it left these institutions vulnerable to factionalism and dependent on the continued dominance of the Hun Sen family. As succession looms, the question persists. Can the apparatus built to serve one family adapt to represent the broader public? Economically, Cambodia's future is tied to its ability to diversify and innovate. The garment sector, once the linchpin of growth, faces rising competition and labor unrest. Relentless development has sacrificed swaths of forest, diminished biodiversity, and left rural communities marginalized. While new Cambodia glitters with urban wealth, rural poverty endures. A new generation, armed with education and digital tools, faces a reckoning. Push for change or accept the rules of the dynasty. International relations, too, remain at a precarious juncture. Cambodia's embrace of China has yielded infrastructure and investment, but at the price of debt and geopolitical friction. As Western governments reduce aid or impose sanctions, the room for strategic agility narrows. The next leadership, be it Hun Sen or a surprise candidate, will inherit a delicate balance, preserve sovereignty in the face of global rivalry, while ensuring development remains broadly beneficial. Perhaps most urgently, the legacy of the Iron Reign weighs on Cambodia's civic life. Decades of repression have bred both resignation and a latent hunger for reform. Civil society organizations, declawed but not destroyed, continue to agitate for land rights, environmental protection, and basic freedoms. Young Cambodians, less beholden to the traumas of the past, are slowly forming their own vision of justice, equality, and what it means to be Khmer Rouge. The future is, in many ways, unwritten. Will the dynasty harden into North Korean-style autocracy, or evolve gradually, perhaps fitfully toward more inclusive, representative governance? Will economic gains trickle down, or will inequality spark unrest? Can Cambodia break the cycle of history, or is it destined to repeat the drama of strongmen and dynasties? What is certain is that Hun Sen's legacy, like a river in flood, has shaped every bank, stone, and ripple in Cambodia's national life. His reign brought peace, yet not always justice. Growth, yet not always fairness. The Iron Man may one day step aside, but the system he fashioned, its strengths and flaws alike, will persist. For Cambodia, the task is to forge a future from both the steel and shadows of its past. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy.